I've been asked to discuss the relationship between the economy and ethics. The most important thing we need to take into account when we raise that issue is to think about the economy the way we think about nuclear energy. If nuclear energy is contained in a strong, solid container, then it can be an enormous boon to humankind, a source of cheap energy, an engine for the economy, no pollution, a lot of good stuff. If the container is corroded, if it's too weak, and the economy oozes out or explodes, it can create an enormous havoc and pain, as, for instance, globalization does to coal miners in the United States, to steel workers, and has similar unsettling effects in many parts of the world. So the secret for a good ethical economy is very similar to the secret of a good nuclear plant, a very solid container. Now, the container is made of two layers. The sociological container. I'll stop thinking about nuclear now and talk about the way societies are engineered. The most important layer of the container are our shared values. That doesn't seem obvious. We usually think about the government should regulate the economy. But the most ethical and, in effect, the most effective way of containing an economy so it will not overwhelm the society but serve it, is that we have a set of shared values. And they tell us that, for instance, a worker should feel that he owes the company, morally speaking, a day's work for a day's pay. That the employer will feel they will not promise the employees that after they retire, they will get X years of Y payments, and then once the employees retire, cheat them out of the pension. So much of this is based on a moral fabric. You can say the employee can sue the government later, but first the corporation later. But often they don't have the means. It's impractical. We need most transactions most of the time to be based on an assumption that the other person will be decent about it. That much what we do, to give another illustration of this very important issue, is based on handshakes. We cannot every time we buy or sell something or order somebody to fix our roof or dig a well to have a 6-page contract, have a lawyer review it, an accountant examine it. Yes, it happens at the margin, but we need most transactions to go smoothly on the ground that we trust each other. So that's the ethical fabric which can contain an economy. When it's broken, when greed explodes, when people sell mortgages to people they know they will not be able to pay, when people increase the price of medications 5,000% overnight without adding anything to the value of the medication, then the economy becomes very unproductive. A lot of the energy goes into protecting each other and transaction costs. Now, we often talk about market failure, but I'm talking about social failure. When a society fails to provide the ethical underpinning, then is when we need to fall back on regulations and the government. We often hear the line that the government that governs least governs best. When people say that, they mean less regulation. I mean when we can rely on the ethical fabric to contain the economy. Yes, at the margin, and hopefully only at the margin, we then need regulation, and regulation definitely had its place. because if you rely only on the moral fabric and the moral container, then those who break it, if they get away with it, then soon other people will follow and say, well, he and she got away with it, I will do it too, and the whole thing will unravel. So it's kind of a security belt that will back up the ethical system when it works well with the law, and when it fails, then when the law has to jump in. Then we have to ensure that when we buy medications, that they are really what the label says, and then if it says organic, it's really organic, so on and so on. Then the law steps in. It's a very heavy-handed way of doing things. And for the last time, we're much better when we need it rarely. And it's a sign of trouble when many of these things are ending in the court. Now, last, in terms of this, my first kind of introduction, is there's an additional problem with the law. And that the law, sadly, often gets captured by special interests. We have this idea that the legislator are people of goodwill who were elected by the public, and if they will not serve the public well, somebody else will be elected next time, and therefore will do the public service. In effect, though, it differs in degrees in different countries. But in all countries, we have special interest groups who, as the economists correctly call it, they capture the legislator and they make the legislator bend the laws not to the public service, but to serve those special interests. So in the United States, the farmers, which amount to a tiny fraction of the labor force, get enormous subsidies and benefit from the state because they have some special political heft and can make the legislator do their bidding rather than the public good. I could give many more examples, but to close this point, it's not enough to pass a law to regulate the economy. We have to ensure that it's really, first of all, designed in a way it's meant to be, to serve the public good, and second, that it's really enforced accordingly, that it's given enough staff, enough means. In the United States, we have very few controls on guns, and then the gun lobby passed a law that the agency in charge of gun control cannot use computers and have to keep all data only 24 hours. So you can see how not only we need to pass laws designed in the public good and not captured, but we need to give them the means and resources. Then they can serve as a backup for the economy, so it will remain in a strong container. So the next question we need to face is what is the basic human nature of the people we are dealing with, whether it's an economy or in a society at large. The economists originally assumed, and some still do, that people are basically rational creatures out to maximize their self-interest. And self-interest was famously often defined as more material goods. And when it became so obvious that people really care deeply about their children and their family and can explain their behavior on the basis of rational economic self-interest of the person, the father or the mother, the economists kind of relented, and they kind of included the family or the household, they say, in our utility function. And then we had this long debate where other social scientists come and show the economists that people behave in ways which are not only to maximize their self-interest, but also concerned about others, the well-being of others, and about the common good. And the economists have been very ingenious and worked very hard to show that any one of those good deeds in the end, somehow in the end, maximize people's self-interest. And when they couldn't show that, they really got trouble. So, for instance, economists are very surprised when people go on the highway and they stop at some restaurant on road, and they know they will never go back there, and they nevertheless leave a tip. The economist said, "Why would you do that? What's your self-interest you serve by doing that?" And then they say, "Well, it may be it was easier for you to leave a tip than calculate." They come up with the most bizarre explanations. Above all, about voting, the economists are correct in pointing out that if you vote, it does not serve your self-interest. You have to stand in line. Sometimes the weather is bad. You have to miss work or playing golf or whatever else you could do. And unless you believe that your one vote will swing the election, you get nothing in return. You could stay home, and it's 99.9 that you're going to get the same outcome. And then there are some very good studies which show the number one reason people vote is their sense that that's their civic duty, a moral dimension they have. Let me give another example. We have an aging population in many of our countries. As a result, an increasing number of people get dementia or Alzheimer. And so look at it from the viewpoint of the other partner. Let's assume that the husband is showing signs of Alzheimer. Now, why would the wife stay with the husband? The usual idea of exchange, that, well, I'll take care of you while you are sick, and then while I'm sick, you'll take care of me, does not hold for Alzheimer patients. They will get ever sicker, and after a while, not even recognize who is giving them the service. They will not recover. So there's no idea of payback. And the economists say, well, it's a question of reputation or self-esteem. And you ask yourself, if you really know what it's like to take care of an Alzheimer patient for a week, for months, for 10 years, who come increasingly difficult and abusive, and you ask yourself, is anybody really going to put up with that in order to enhance their reputation? They could move to another city and change their name. The fact is, though, that 90% of the couple, the other partners, stay. And when you ask them why, they get one answer. It's the right thing to do. So my first point about, you wish to talk about micro-social economics. And people are not anywhere near like the kind of person economists assumed, but they are what I like to call moral wrestlers. We are all do have a debased self. We have instincts, urges, which are antisocial. They are sexual, aggressive, and others. And then we have a nobler self, ideas of what is the right behavior, what we should do. There may be a fraction of percentage of psychopaths who don't have that second self. But the rest of us have both a debased self and a nobler self. And our life is, and the life of all people, if you really scrape all the theories and look the way people really act, as a struggle putting us in both directions. I think there's a very simple line which telescopes it all, and that is if I say, I would like to go and see a movie, but I ought to visit my friend in the hospital. In that simple sentence, you have everything. What I would like to do, what is fun, my simpler self, my basic self, is to go and see a movie. What I feel obligated, morally committed to do is see my friend. Do I always see my friend? Do I always go to the movies? Now, I used a trivial example, but we can talk about much more important things, like we talked earlier about Alzheimer's, partners. So our life is, first of all, should be seen as this continuous struggle between these two parts of us. And the next, of course, important question is, under what conditions get one part of us stronger under one condition or the other? And there is very much where first education comes in. I mean, I now get a lot of trouble when I say that children are born barbarian, but I'm not talking about only sociology. I have 5 absolutely wonderful sons, but they were not born wonderful. If you leave children on their own and don't socialize them, don't educate them, we have very strong data to show they crawl on 4 and bark. They don't even learn to walk erect or have no capacity for language unless the society educates them. It's a famous case in Temple City, California, where a couple had a child and they didn't want it, but they wouldn't go kill it. So they put it in the back room, basically gave it like a dog, and put some food on a plate, and that child was found there when she was 13, and she had no human features. And so our humanity, including our capacity for ethical behavior, is introduced to us by our parents or guardians or some other educator who, as a phrase, socializes us. But it doesn't stop. There's some people think that kind of when we're 18 or 21, the bell rings, and now we have a character, and we are adults, and now we're going to behave. But the fact is that from then on, we are constantly under the eyes, not of the government, that happens too, but of each other. And we either encourage us to be better than we would be otherwise by appreciating good behavior and chiding antisocial behavior, or if that element is missing, then we get the kind of rise in antisocial behavior we see in many parts of the world. So, human nature is an endless struggle between our better side and our debased side. We need to study, we do study what shows up one part or the other. Part of the story is our education. The other part is the informal social controls. This is true for economics, for how we behave as a shopkeeper, as a worker, as a supervisor, as a trader, just as it is for any other parts of our life, though the proportion might be different. And I'd like to approach this whole same subject from a different angle, and that is the studies of happiness. Again, we go to take back to the point we said that people want to maximize their happiness. And if they don't find it in material goods, they will want to maximize their esteem or prestige or sense of self-importance. There clearly is such an element. But there's something about the English language which prevents us to see there's a whole other source of sense of enhancement, of the sense of duty and responsibility. And we use in English the same word to be satisfied. When I had a wonderful dinner and a great bottle of wine, a wonderful vacation, I'm satisfied, I'm happy. And when we talk about having served a night with a cancer patient and clean up after her, share her pain, encourage her, we are satisfied that I helped my friend. But if you look at it simply by introspection or by study, these are two very different feelings. This one is a fun and joy, and this one of having lived up to a moral commitment. The telltale sign of the difference is that living up to a moral commitment requires sacrifices. staying up the whole night with a cancer patient, any way you look at it, it's not fun. It's the sense we did good. But the sense of did good often involves pain, which is exactly the opposite. They don't get happiness out of pain. And so what we need to recognize is that we have two pathways to move us forward, and we should not collapse these two motivations the way that Adam Smith does in the Wealth of a Nation, but not, by the way, in the theory of moral sentiment. So that's one other way of looking at this duality of our behavior and to see what drives us when we need to do, let's say, things for the environment or helping the poor by giving something up so we can protect nature for the future, so we can share some of our surplus with people in need. One other way of getting into the same topic is the way preferences are formed. So economists tend to look at preference in the following way. We have a preference for whatever, that much coffee, good food, or whatever. And if we then change our purchasing behavior, or it could be our work or saving, but let me state with an example of what we purchase. There could be two reasons which explain the change from time one to time two. One is our income increased. So now we can buy more of whatever we prefer down the preference line, and then we can get into complicated questions how we distribute the additional income among various purchases. But more income, we can purchase more. Second, new information. So if we learn that one product is not as efficient or it doesn't live up to the promises, we'll buy something more of a different product. But the key assumption of that story is that preferences are fixed, because if between point 1 and point 2 your taste will change, then you will not be able to explain it. So change in prices or information, you'll have to have a whole new set of variables that explains why your preferences have changed. Hence, it's essential for economists to assume that preferences or tastes are stable. The fact, though, is that they are not. The fact is that we are all the time influenced by advertising or by cultural changes or by social movements or by cultural changes to change our preferences. Hence, any good study of socioeconomics will add to the study of the effect of prices and information, which surely have their effect. The question of what other social, political, cultural factors made us change our preferences. So when, for instance, people in the United States who used to be very committed to saving and were very, very reluctant to go into debt, and at a certain point, with the introduction of credit cards, they suddenly become much, much more willing to engage in debt. What happened here? Did the cost of taking loans declined? No. Was there new important information about the merit of saving? No. What happened is the credit cards found a way for people not to realize that they're getting into debts. So they didn't feel guilty about buying things with credit cards because it did not imply to them that they're violating the social taboo and the moral values on being in debt. So if you want to have a comprehensive understanding of social sciences, of socioeconomic behavior, we must include the factors which drive and shape preferences. No place is this more important than when we come to welfare economics. Because the basic assumption of welfare economics, absolutely the basic assumption, is the way a good economy is one which takes the total resources it has, the GDP, and distributes it among the various people so it will achieve the highest level of satisfaction of their preferences. This is so essential, I'd like to repeat it. Welfare economics assumes that how you tell a good from a bad distribution, after all, one of the most important things the economy does, it allocates what we produced among the various users and producers, is when it satisfies as many preferences of as many people as possible. It's kind of a utilitarian ethics. What that disregards is that these preferences are not innocent. They're not coming out of the individual inherent true inner self. They're often manipulated by advertising and influenced by culture. And therefore this respect libertarians give in economics, and here they are together, to the individual and their resistance to any attempts to sway the public and convince the public that smoking or using sugar too much are harmful, disregards the fact that the preference to begin with are influenced and manipulated, and hence for us to add the social voice on the side of social responsibility and common good just adds a little balancing to the forces which manipulated preferences. Let me close here on a very telling example. I don't know to what degree it reached other parts of the world. But in the United States over the last 5 years, the industry succeeded in convincing young women that having hair in their private parts is a horrible thing, and that they have to go and expose themselves to considerable pain, to waxing and expenditure in order to be pure in that new way. Now, 5 years ago, nobody would occur to them that this is their preference. So here, like so often before, the industry created both the preference and the product. It sells both at the same time. So for us to say to people, come on, is that really something you really need? Does not say we're going to ban them or forbid them from expressing their inner self. It's just adding one more voice of sensibility, of concern to all the other voices that they have. So let me put it all together for a moment. We need to put a study of economics into the broader social context. The broader social context requires thinking about human nature. It requires us to understand the communal fabric. It requires us to understand the role of ethics, not to replace self-interest in economic concerns, but to marry the two of them together. Thank you very much.